Hello, sports fans. This is BVM Sports Chalk Talk. I'm Lucas Semb alongside Scott Procter and Matt Morris, and we are back for another episode. But before we get into today's episode, we want you to know that BVM Sports wants to hear from you. Tell us how we're doing by taking a quick survey about our sports coverage. You can find the survey by visiting any of our social media profiles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or by visiting our website at bvmsports.com. Your thoughts will help us take BVM Sports to a whole new level. Thank you very much. And now, without further ado, let's hop into today's content. We will break down the Carolina Panthers trade for Sam Darnold and make our picks for part of the NFL draft. But first, we'll recap NCAA championship game with Baylor coming out on top. Scott, what do you make of their wire-to-wire domination?
Yeah, man, I have said for months now, I feel like at this point, almost a broken record, I don't know who the Baylor Bears' best player is. In the national championship later, I still am unsure. Jared Butler, who obviously won the tournament's most outstanding player, Maceo Teague and Davion Mitchell are as lethal of a big three as I've ever seen in college basketball. And Mullet Meyer and Adam Flagler are, would start on just about every other team in the nation and are instant offense off the bench. Baylor defended at an extremely high level. They dominated the boards, knocked down perimeter shots. And Baylor is unbeatable when they shoot 43% from three like they did on Monday night because of how they defend. And they're even tougher to beat when they out-rebound their opponent by 16 like they did on Monday night. The Bears' big men came to play, period, point blank. Mark Vital and Flo Thamba combined for 17 boards while Drew Timme led Gonzaga with just 5 of his own. The Bears came out with urgency on both ends. They never let up and were the best team wire to wire. They are more than deserving national champions.
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott. And I think that first punch that Baylor threw just caught Gonzaga completely off guard. And then you add to that Jalen Suggs gets 2 really quick fouls that forces him to the bench. Doesn't help Gonzaga at all. There were stints where you could see Gonzaga finally getting into their offense, finally, having some success, cutting it down to basically 10. But then Baylor would just come back, and the overall ability of their guards, whether it was Butler or Mitchell or Teague, to not just create for other players, because they were obviously able to help out with the passing down in the post and off of those screens, but also just to create for themselves and really take advantage of Gonzaga's inability to, guard like 1 through 5. I mean, those switches where you'd see Kispert or Timme on Butler or Mitchell really hurt Gonzaga because it was basically a guaranteed bucket for one of those Baylor guards. And it was just wire to wire. Kudos to Butler. Definitely don't take anything away from Gonzaga. They had an amazing season. They had an amazing team. Just came out, just tired and didn't look like they were playing Gonzaga basketball throughout the entire game. So, congrats to Baylor with their first ever championship and Coach Drew for an amazing year with an amazing team.
I think Skip Bayless said it best. He said Baylor made Drew Timme and Corey Kispert look like dudes trying to get a run in at the YMCA.
For real,
that's honestly what it looked like. A big mismatch with athleticism, but I really feel for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. You go undefeated the entire season, chance to be the first team in 45 years with an undefeated season, and then the one game you lose is the national championship. But they didn't come out right. When you're a basketball player, you want to come out loose, competent, ready to go, but you don't want to come out arrogant and laid back. There's a big difference, and from the tip, they seemed like they thought they were the better team. They let their guard down, and their hole was dug early, and they were never able to climb out of it. I think we learned a lot about the Baylor Bears, though. Well, at least the general public did. A lot of people were surprised to see them hitting these threes at the rate that they were. Big shot after big shot to maintain their lead, but that's what they do. That's what they've done all year long. That's their identity. And on the glass, they were just a bunch of dogs. Mark Vital creating so many extra chances. Davion Mitchell with his dribble pull-up. The list goes on and on. It was a dominant performance from a team that came prepared and excited. And congrats to the Bears.
And Luke, you have to think, you mentioned the start, and I think Gonzaga was done early in that game. And, you have to think that coming off, the high that, Jalen Suggs, half-court buzzer beater heave, probably had on that team, that was something that, just 48 hours later, it seemed that they hadn't really completely rebounded from and, gotten past. And it was evident early in that game, and they were just never able to recover.
Right. You got to go by the rule, the 24-hour rule, 48-hour rule, whatever it is. You enjoy it for a little bit, but then you got to get back to business, and they never did that. But congrats to the Bears for their first title in school history. And this game did feature a lot of NBA prospects, so it begs the question, Matt, which player are you most impressed with and excited to see at the next level?
I mean, there were so many to talk about, whether it's Mitchell. I think Butler has been underrated, and he shows that he's going to be a great guard. I hope he does well in the NBA. Mullet Meyer, Drew Timme, Corey Kispert, but Jalen Suggs. I mean, it has to be Jalen Suggs. I've been talking about Jalen Suggs all year, whether it was on this show or on my podcast, Mulligan. And Jalen Suggs has been my favorite, NBA prospect to watch. Just from his athleticism, his tenacity, both on offense and defense, his leadership ability to come in to a team that has seniors like a Drew Timme and like a Corey Kispert, and a Gonzaga team that tends to be more senior heavy, and just be their guy, and to be someone that the team can look to and can feed off of, has been unbelievable. Obviously, the shot was awesome. And this is a guy that, for me personally, as great as Cade Cunningham has been and how great he will be, Suggs feels like that guy that can come in, and whether he's the point guard, the shooting guard, whatever position he goes into, whatever team he goes into, he's going to start producing for that team right away in the NBA. So I'm excited about Jalen Suggs. I'm excited to see where he goes. And I think that although people are always saying that his ceiling isn't as high as like a Cade Cunningham, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. And I think that he's going to have an amazing NBA career. Better than what I think a lot of people would say.
Yeah, man, I also love Jalen Suggs. I talked about him, a ton on this show. And I honestly do believe that he'll probably end up being the best pro that we saw play, there on Monday's national championship. But the opening sequence of that Monday national championship tells you everything you need to know about Davion Mitchell. He pulls up from mid-range after a crossover in IE's face for the game's first points. Draws a charge on the aforementioned Jalen Suggs just a couple seconds later. Then comes down and buries the 3 seconds after that. All within the first 2 minutes of the game that everyone is watching against college basketball's best team throughout the season. He was just named the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year. I've been calling him Donovan Mitchell Jr., but he's been nicknamed Off Night because that's what you'll have when he's guarding you. Good luck getting off anything offensively when he's in front of you. Offensively for Mitchell, his first step is just so explosive, similar to a Kemba Walker that we've seen at UConn and obviously in the NBA as well. He can blow right by you and finish at the rim with both hands. He has a nasty handle. Luke already mentioned the mid-range pull-up jumper that he just has deep in his bag. And, when you back off him to protect the paint and him blowing by you, he has a pull-up game that you have to respect. And he's an excellent passer as well. He's the first player in over 30 years with double-digit assists and no turnovers in a men's Final Four game and their win over Houston, where I believe he had 11 assists. His all-around 3-level game will translate to the next level, especially at the defensive end. So I'm super excited for Davion Mitchell, his pro prospects, and it's just been a joy to watch him at Baylor.
Yeah, the comparisons to Donovan Mitchell are honestly spot on. I think Davion Mitchell has truly showed he's a professional that can play at a high level in the NBA, and I think that will end up panning out, and we're going to have to see what happens. But I'm going to be an echo of Matt here, and I'm going to say Jalen Suggs. My pick for him obviously goes deeper than just this game. What he's done this season as a 19-year-old freshman has been honestly unprecedented. Suggs, despite the loss, he was really a bright spot for them. Out of halftime, he knocked down a couple threes. He gave them a push. He didn't force anything. It was an efficient shooting night, 8 of 15, over 50% shooting for 22 points. He had 1 assist, but his passing didn't show up on the stat sheet. He made the extra pass at the right time every time. He kept the defense moving. The numbers didn't show in the rebound category either, where he had only 3, but he was attacking the glass, getting an extra touch, keeping it alive. He has all the intangibles that carry over to the next level, and he just has that fight in him that's really honestly something you can't teach. You have to give all the credit to Baylor for coming out with a good game plan to slow him down, but he was still able to go ahead and get his. So I think Jalen Suggs is going to be one of those players who, whether you're having an off night or not, he's going to be able to make a difference at the next level.
I agree.
And Luke, you are absolutely right, and I love that you mentioned it. Jalen Suggs isn't that star player that just has to take over the game, or when he's having, quote-unquote, like an off night, isn't going to at least help your team in some way. He helps the Gonzaga team and whatever team he's on in so many different ways, to your point. He doesn't force himself onto the team. He doesn't try and force a shot. He had 1 shot last night where I thought he might have forced it, but it was in a time when Gonzaga kind of needed a boost. So he pulled up for three, and it wasn't the greatest shot, no, but that's a good shot for Jalen Suggs. And his ability to play within the team rather than force everyone else to kind of play around him is so unbelievable from a guy that is clearly going to be, a top 3 draft pick.
Right, but the biggest thing that I like about him is that what you teach in basketball is that if you get rid of the ball, you're going to get it back. So you have to understand, you have to get everyone involved, you have to have that patience. And for a 19-year-old playing at the highest level, an undefeated season until the national championship, to have that understanding, playing with the guys that he's playing with, it's very impressive, and that's why I think just mentally he's going to be able to transition his game to the NBA very well. But college basketball is so much fun this season. We are glad to have it back and excited to see these top prospects continue on. But let's transition over to the NFL, where the Carolina Panthers traded for former Jets QB Sam Darnold, giving up a 6th-round pick in this year's draft and a 2nd and a 4th-round pick in 2022. Scott, what does this mean for the Panthers?
This is a relatively big deal for Carolina. The Panthers were, and probably still are, a team that desperately wants and wanted to upgrade their quarterback position. Head coach Matt Rule said, publicly, he said as much after the season that Teddy Bridgewater has to have a, quote, tremendous offseason, after more injuries and not playing his best football to end the season. I'm not sure Sam Darnold is a significant upgrade over Bridgewater, especially considering he has just one game over the last 2 seasons with 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Those aren't necessarily high standards. That's the same amount of games with those numbers as Dwayne Haskins, Taysom Hill, Jalen Hurts. But as I've said on this show, I believe Sam Darnold has talent. He's not a scrub, and he's been more of a product of his environment than anything. Adam Gase, a sorry supporting cast and overall roster will make just about any young quarterback look awful. But that won't be the case in Carolina for Darnold. He'll have offensive minds in Matt Rule and Joe Brady, who I mentioned before, engineered LSU, and Joe Burrow's, spectacular national championship season just a couple years ago. Those two scheming up things with the MVP talent and Christian McCaffrey in the backfield and legit weapons on the perimeter with Robbie Anderson and DJ Morris is a completely different situation that Sam Darnold is going to be walking into. I sense that this move was prompted by the notion that the top 3 to 4 quarterbacks in this upcoming draft will be selected before Carolina picks at number 8. So the Panthers could still even add another impactful offensive weapons, whether it be, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, take your pick, whoever's really available still at number 8. But, overall, I'm really excited for Sam Darnold and to see what he's capable of in the NFL with a competent supporting cast and without the excuse that comes with playing in New York.
Yeah, I mean, this is the best team that Darnold has ever played on, like point blank. Not just from, the weapons that you mentioned, but to the coaching staff, to even, I'd argue, the GM as well, although I think Douglas has the opportunity to be a great GM with the Jets. That's nothing against him. But you look at, McCaffrey, 287 rushes, over 1,300 yards, 15 TDs in 2019, and then another 1,000 yards in receiving and 4 receiving TDs in 2019 when he was that MVP, running back. If he comes back, half of that, it's still the best running back that, Sam Darnold has ever played for. And then DJ Moore with 66 receptions, over 1,100 yards. Robbie Anderson, 95 receptions with over 1,000 yards. I mean, these are actual weapons that Darnold can use, not to mention a great O-line. And what I like about it is to your point, Scott, now that Carolina has this, they can just do what they want, and they have flexibility to, whether he's their guy or not, continue to build this team. And you don't have to draft because you don't have to draft a quarterback, although you still could, assuming that one falls to you. But you can fill a need. They want to add to the O-line. They want to add to the D-line. You could get a cornerback. You could trade back because there's plenty of teams now that are going to look at that 8 spot and we could probably get our quarterback at that point.
Yep.
Look at the Patriots or somebody, who really wants to get their quarterback of the future. I like this move for Carolina. Unfortunately for Teddy Bridgewater, it seems like he's going to be done. I don't think they keep him long enough for there to be a quarterback battle. I think that they'll probably try and move him, and I think, either on draft night or right after the draft, there'll be teams that are looking at Teddy Bridgewater and seeing someone that could definitely step up in the short term and be a quarterback for them, because he really didn't have that terrible of a year. I mean, he still had about 69% completion rate and threw for over 3,000 yards. It's not, and about 15 touchdowns.
I believe he finished 17th in QBR, while Darnold, I believe, finished
middle of the pack. And there's plenty of teams that could use a middle of the pack quarterback. I mean, honestly, I think the Bears should be calling, because I would say that Teddy Bridgewater is a better option than Andy Dalton. But overall, good move for Carolina, and this kind of solidifies that the Jets are going to be picking a quarterback at 2.
Right, and I personally think this is kind of an experiment for the Panthers. I think they're treating it as a prove-it type of deal. The Panthers had to decide whether to sign Darnold long-term or pick up his fifth-year option worth $20 million, and they picked up the fifth-year option. So to me, I think the Panthers I think what this tells me is that they tried trading up in the draft, and, they just couldn't get the price right, and they had to settle for Darnold. So what I think this means is that they want to see him with real weapons before deciding on their future. This could be a long-term move, but they're treating it like a short-term move in terms of his contract. I think he'll be no better than Teddy Two Gloves, but we're going to have to wait and see what the season brings. But like you mentioned, Matt, this trade now basically tells us the Jets are fixated on the QB position entering the NFL draft. Matt, who do you think they'll be taking number 2 overall when they're on the clock?
I mean, I really think it's Zach Wilson. I mean, we can argue – Justin Fields or Zach Wilson. Mac Jones has somehow come into the conversation, which I disagree. I think the top 3 quarterbacks are clearly Lawrence, Wilson, and Fields. Whatever order you want to argue with, we can argue that, night and day. But it seems like the Jets are really in on Zach Wilson, and I understand why. Besides, the great season he had coming off of a shoulder surgery, the intangible stuff that he's able to bring, the arm talent, what guys he's compared to based on the NFL. And then we've talked about it on the show before, and I know I have. If you look at what guys like the offenses that Mike LaFleur has been around, whether it's his brother Matt or Kyle Shanahan out in San Francisco, these are offensive schemes that really allow a quarterback to do the bare minimum and really help him be the best that he can be. You've seen Jimmy Garoppolo and Aaron Rodgers have success, and there's a clear difference between the weapons surrounding those 2 quarterbacks and the talent of those 2 quarterbacks in particular. And so you bring in Zach Wilson, a guy that you can mold and build and add all that draft capital around, and I think that Zach Wilson will play really well in that offensive scheme. And he played a similar kind of offensive scheme in BYU. If you look at the film, there's a lot of plays where I watched Zach Wilson. I'm like, well, I've seen the Green Bay Packers run that. And I've seen Aaron Rodgers do that very well. So I think that, whether you want to argue if Wilson is the clear second best quarterback in this draft, that's something else we can talk about. I think he is. And I think the Jets are going to draft him because of all those things that he'll be able to do, not just in the offensive scheme, but with the draft capital that the Jets have and those weapons they'll surround him with.
Matt, that's great stuff, and I completely agree. The 2021 NFL draft really begins at pick number 3 to me, because the New York Jets should have a no-brainer on their hands at number 2 overall. I sat here back on this show in November and said that Zach Wilson deserved Heisman consideration for the special things he did at BYU this past season, earning the highest PFF passing grade ever, edging out Joe Burrow's historical season at LSU. If it wasn't for the generational talent that Trevor Lawrence is perceived to be, I believe Wilson would be the unanimous number 1 overall pick this season. But the Jets will gladly take him at number 2. If you just look around the landscape of the league's best quarterbacks for me for a second, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, even Josh Allen to a lesser extent, they each have insane arm talent, but can be just as dangerous using their legs. And I don't mean in the design quarterback way or scrambling for first down way, the way that, Michael Vick, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson have, kind of made, famous. But, the league's best quarterbacks, those guys are exceptional at using their mobility to extend plays, evade pressure, and create off schedule. That is Zach Wilson's game. There's no coincidence that last March he was in a 3-way battle for the BYU starting job and went from being a relatively unknown draft prospect a few months ago to now being the number 2 overall pick. It's because when you turn on the tape, like Matt alluded to, he does things that just simply can't be taught. Poise, a quick release, the ability to process information quickly, and all the arm talent in the world makes Zach Wilson the no-brainer number 2 pick. And the Jets trading of Sam Darnold tells me that they agree.
Right, Scott, you mentioned how QBs need to be dual threat to be successful.
I didn't say that verbatim.
You did, because you mentioned their legs.
No, I didn't. Dual threat didn't come out of my mouth.
Well, you don't have to say it. You're just saying it when you say they have great arm strength and great leg speed, right? That's dual threat. That means they're good at
mobility.
That means you're good at two things.
Dual threat is different than mobility.
Listen and say what I said.
Okay, so say what you said again. If you're good at both passing the ball and running the ball, you're good at how many things?
I'll just tell you what I said. The greatest quarterbacks, like Zach Wilson, I'm talking about Mahomes, Wilson, Watson, they each have insane arm talent, but can be just as dangerous using their legs.
Exactly. They're dual threat QBs.
Sure.
So now listen, I understand that Wilson is going to be drafted second, because it's been that way since draft conversation has come up. They're fixated on taking Zach Wilson.
That's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true, because a few months ago, the narrative was it's Lawrence, Fields, everybody else. Wilson's steam has only picked up recently in a few months as people have really dived into the draft process and dived into film. So this isn't something that's just been a thing for months now. It's not
the
true.
Last time that we talked about those two on this show, Wilson was slated to go to the Jets.
I'm talking about months ago.
He was slated to go second overall. So that's where we are. Now, I could go back to Fields throwing 6 touchdowns versus the Clemson Tigers and eliminating the soon-to-be number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence. I could go back to the fact that he played in the Big Ten, one of the best football conferences in America. But I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Let's just talk about his pro day. Fields ran a 4.44 40-yard dash, the fastest since RG3, and he made some incredible, difficult passes across his body, on the move, on the money. So if you want to watch film, let's talk about film. You go to watch his pro day, and that's simply all you need to know. He's got the tools to be an NFL modern, talented QB at 6'3", 227 pounds. Dual threat. He can make something out of nothing. He's performed at a high level at the biggest stage. I think he's the most ready for the league and will adapt the easiest because he's played against better talent. So my whole thing here is that I understand Wilson is a great prospect. Fields is a great prospect as well, but the Jets need to change their culture immediately. Zach Wilson might be better long-term, but Justin Fields is going to be good too. So I think they should draft Fields, start playing their best football right now, because he's going to be good long-term too. But I think he's going to be more ready right after the draft heading into this season. And I think that would benefit their franchise more than it would waiting kind of to see if there's a culture shock with Zach Wilson. So that to me is why I think they should take Fields second.
I don't necessarily completely disagree with that. Listen, I love Justin Fields. To your point, he is bigger, faster, stronger, and just a better athlete than Zach Wilson. But, to your point, Zach Wilson is still an above-average athlete at the quarterback position who can run, make people miss, and use his legs. That's a compliment to his cannon of an arm. And that's where I'm going. Like I said, look at the league's best quarterbacks right now. They're all pass first. And I'm not saying Justin Fields doesn't have that ability to be a pass first quarterback in the NFL, because I believe he does. I mentioned that I think he's shown enough as a passer to be coached up to be a consistently accurate passer in the league. But again, Zach Wilson's upside, I do disagree with the notion that Fields might be better for a franchise out the gate, better, or what I'm saying. I disagree with that notion that Fields would be better than Wilson early on, especially on a team, if we're talking about the New York Jets, that they've improved this offseason. I know, Luke, you're a fan of things that they've done. They added Keelan Cole on the outside. I believe they also added Corey Davis. They also I think they grabbed Tevin Coleman at running back as well. So they made improvements on the offensive side, but the Jets' offense is still going to be below average. They're still not going to have great weapons, and I would be more inclined to put a quarterback who's hasn't played with great weapons as a Zach Wilson at BYU, as opposed to a Justin Fields, who, again, as we mentioned before, don't need to death.
And not only that, Scott, but Luke, your point of Fields will be better right away and it'll help the Jets win.
I disagree.
Who are they winning against?
Excuse me, I didn't say win. I said they need to make a culture change. That doesn't mean they need to have a winning record. I don't think Fields is going to do that. But he's going to come in.
I have a question.
Well, then why not draft the guy that has the higher ceiling?
Yeah, what exactly do you mean by that, a culture change, as a reason why the Jets should take Fields over Wilson? What do you mean by that?
Because they've been losing season over season over season. I think Fields right now could come in and get this team 6 or 7 wins. I think he truly could. And for them as a franchise, that would be huge.
As a rookie.
Yes, for them as a franchise, I think that would be huge because they've just been riddled with losing seasons. I don't think Wilson's going to come in and do that, but they need to do it as soon as they can because the mindset there is not right. They're trying to get off to a new foot with a new head coach and Saleh, and I think this is just something that would benefit them, taking the player who's proven he can play at the highest stage. You can't go wrong either way. So let's talk about the third pick on the clock, and that will be the San Francisco 49ers, who also made a pretty huge trade this offseason, moving 3 first-round picks for number 3 overall in this year's draft. Scott, who should the Niners take at number 3?
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that I believe the draft really begins right here with the 49ers at number 3 overall because you don't trade away 3 first-round picks to move up and not select the quarterback. But obviously then the question becomes who, after Lawrence and Wilson are presumably off the board. Trey Lance is actually super interesting because the extreme upside is certainly there, but he's so raw and had limited starts in college. However, the 49ers might feel like they can take a flyer on a project knowing that he can sit for a year or two behind Jimmy G, who is still more than capable of winning games when healthy. Mac Jones also makes sense from this standpoint. Who are the last 2 quarterbacks 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan made a Super Bowl with? Matt Ryan in Atlanta and Jimmy G 2 seasons ago. 2 kind of statues, pure pocket passers. Which quarterback in this draft class is most similar stylistically to those guys? That'd be Mac Jones. And again, you wouldn't have to play Mac Jones right away. This is a guy you can develop, get accustomed to your system, and see the benefits of in a year or two. But if it were me picking at number 3 with Lawrence and Wilson off the board after I've already traded 3 firsts to get here, I'm banking on Justin Fields' potential. He's a superior athlete, as I mentioned, who showed me enough as a thrower to where I think he can develop into a consistently accurate and capable thrower of the football. The 49ers should select Justin Fields number 3 overall, but I truly, truly believe that Shanahan believes he can develop either Trey Lance or Mac Jones as well.
You know what, Scott? I disagree in the sense that I agree that it should be Fields, but all of those points that you made, I got to point out, one, how many Super Bowls has Shanahan won with Matt Ryan and, Jimmy Garoppolo?
So, yeah, let me respond to that. So that's a good point. So I think there's 2 ways that Kyle Shanahan can look at that. He could think one way, I've made it to the highest stage of the NFL with this type of quarterback, with this type of passer. And that's why he might want to select the Mac Jones. Or Kyle Shanahan could be thinking, the reason I didn't get over that hump and win a Super Bowl is because of the type of quarterback I had, and I'm going to go in the Justin Fields, Trey Lance route. So, the dilemma is certainly there, but I'm just saying I can honestly see Kyle Shanahan going both ways, and I truly believe that he feels that he can coach up either type of quarterback.
But whether he was successful back in the day with those guys, I think the league's totally evolved since.
It's not back in the day. It's not back. It was 2 seasons ago and about 4 seasons ago. It's not really back.
Wouldn't you say the league's pretty much evolved within 4 to 2 seasons? Because since then, we've had Mahomes going crazy since 4 seasons ago. We've had Lamar Jackson, the ultimate dual threat. We've had Josh Allen. We've seen a new breed of quarterbacks.
Yeah, Tom Brady is still winning Super Bowl
right now.
Luke, the last time Shanahan was in the Super Bowl, like I just mentioned with Jimmy G, Patrick Mahomes was the guy he was playing against. So, no, I don't think the league has changed much in 2 years. No, I don't.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I guess so the way that I go about it is I go with those 2 routes that Shanahan can go. My whole point is you can't win with just a Jimmy G or a Matt Ryan, and I think that's been proven. And so what I then say is you don't mortgage the future of your franchise for Mac Jones. How are you going to justify that to anyone? I mean, Mac Jones is not worth 3 first-round picks. I think that's Justin Fields. Justin Fields is that guy that you go and you get. And if Kyle Shanahan thinks that he can develop Mac Jones or a Trey Lance, then imagine what he could do with the Justin Fields. And the other question that I think that Shanahan and John Lynch are asking themselves, in particular, based on that last Super Bowl they went to 2 seasons ago, is, who's making that throw? Jimmy Garoppolo overthrew, I believe it was Emmanuel Sanders, for what probably would have been the go-ahead touchdown and sealing the deal for them winning the Super Bowl. Yeah. Jimmy G didn't make that throw, and then Pat Mahomes with Kansas City clearly, took over. I think that when you go into this NFL pro, all those pro days and this draft, you have to ask yourself who makes that throw. I don't think Mac Jones makes that throw. And ironically, he didn't make that throw. If you watch this pro day, he missed the throw to Devontae Smith that was basically the same thing.
Yep.
Justin Fields makes that throw. This should not be, the draft shouldn't start at number 3, to your point. It should start at 4 because it should be clearly, Lawrence, Wilson, Fields. And that's it. Like the 49ers should be drafting Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to flip that here as we wrap up. Because I took Fields at 2, I think the Niners should take Wilson at 3. And for me, I mean, it goes with my same point of how he'll be able to – he's going to have a little culture shock, but he's going to be able to grow with an organization. He's a top QB. He should be top 3. I think he'll be a good fit with the 49ers because they have lethal pieces and young pieces he can grow right alongside Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, et cetera, et cetera. They'll have a solid young core going forward, and they'll be set for the future and the now. Playing with that talent will take some pressure off of him, and we'll get to see him adapt a little easier playing with top-tier talent. I think he's not going to be a franchise savior, like I mentioned right off the bat. I think Fields has the chance to do that and change the culture. I reiterate that. But give me Wilson 3rd because that would just be an explosive, fun offense to watch. And I think that's where he belongs. He's had a great career, and he's got great attributes in terms of a skill set and whatnot. But he can't make up for the lack of talent that he played against in college. I know you guys don't like that, but that's going to be the biggest shock to him playing at the NFL level. And he's going to have to go through it. But I think he's going to be good at the next level. I just think he'd be a better fit with the 49ers. But the draft isn't until April 29th. So for the next couple of weeks, you can expect to see us here on Chalk Talk debating certain draft picks. And we are out of time here today, so your next chance to catch that will be next week. As always, thanks for watching from myself, Scott Proctor, and Matt Morris. Have a great rest of your week.